So it was a banner day at Gulfstream Park, Pegasus World Cup day. We had a lot of home team action on the West Point side with Battle of Normandy and Integration in the Pegasus turf, and Integration ran too well to lose, man. Like, just made that early move under Frankie Dettori and just got nailed late by Spirit of St. Louis. He was the best horse in the race. Battle of Normandy did not get as good of a trip, but overall, it was just a terrific day of racing, both there and at Oaklawn. We're going to talk plenty about Sandman and the Southwest, because that was some kind of effort. But I wanted to start with the Pegasus just because it was a $3 million race, and it was won in a very, very impressive performance by White Abarrio. I know we talked a little bit about this off the air, John. It's hard to feel warm and fuzzy about a horse like that doing something like that, considering what barn he comes out of. He's obviously a really nice horse, and it wasn't like a stacked field or anything. It was pretty much him and then two other like really top class handicap horses. But man, to see him run away from Saudi Crown like he was standing still, kind of reminded him of the old days at Gulfstream Park and Saffie Joseph's horses. He's got better, higher class horses now, but I've seen a lot of his horses do that. He's an admirable horse, but it's just hard to feel good about that winner winning like that to me.
Well, and let's also look at the, on both sides of the coin here. You, like you said, Joe, you had White Abarrio, who ran, a phenomenal race and looked like he was running with his tail on fire because he just broke away from all the rest of the group. It was not a stellar group. It was not a field where you would say top to bottom. It was a $3 million grade one kind of race. We talked about it, I think, off air that, in the Longines rankings, there was only one horse in the entries that were in the top 100. So certainly that was Mystic Dan, and really that was because of Mystic Dan's Triple Crown, races more so than his current resume. But there were 12 horses that were originally entered, 10 colts, 1 gelding, 1 filly, but nothing really where you would go, oh my God, it's a must-see kind of race. Where was Sierra Leone? Where was Forever Young, Fierceness? Horses like that are going to be running Rattle and Roll, that are going to be running overseas probably in the Saudi race and those, even bigger ticket type races. But, it was still a race that right now is a grade one. They gave away $3 million. And, White Abarrio ran, like he was supposed to run in that race. It did surprise me that he ran away from the field as aggressively as he did. It certainly gives, a lot of juice for us to talk about, as far as, back and forth, what we think about the horse. But, and that wasn't Saffie's only win of the day. He had a couple of other wins. Be My Guest was, in the turf race. So he had a banner day. The rest of us that had horses running, whether it was you, whether it was me at DJ Stable, whether it was Resolute, none of us had a good day racing at Gulfstream on Pegasus Day. Joe, the numbers also came out where, from a handle standpoint, they were at $41 million on track handle, which is consistent with like 22 and 23, 24 last year. They had $47 million of on-track handle. So I don't know what that's attributed to. Maybe it's because, Alex Earl wasn't there this year. She was there last year. I would attribute maybe $6 million of money being changing hands because of her. I don't know. But certainly, they had a great card overall. I think they had a great amount of people that were there. They sold out. You couldn't get a ticket unless you bought one or you knew somebody. And they had great racing overall and great weather. But, I wasn't as excited about this year's Pegasus card as I had been about previous cards. That's just a personal feeling on it. So much so, even though we had a couple of horses in the undercard races, we stayed in frigid New Jersey because it to me, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great day of racing, like especially kind of in the dead of winter. It's nice to have these big cards, to have something to bet on and get excited about. But, John, if this were $1 million purse,
right,
do you honestly think that it would be a significantly weaker field? It really is just the space on the calendar. We talked about this before. Like, I think that they'd be better off decreasing the purse back down to $1 million and distributing that $2 million into the rest of the purse accounts or some of the other overnights or some of the other stakes. Like, I think, like, especially from where it started as like a $12 million, $16 million race. like you basically just have the Don handicap now. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don handicap was a great race. So was the Gulfstream Park turf handicap, which is now the Pegasus turf.
Right.
I don't know. Like I get that they like having the big days, and you can still have a big day, but I just feel like the Pegasus branding has completely fallen apart to where it's just it's not the star-studded event that I think it was, at least initially. And I'm sure they did get a good crowd there. Like that's awesome, and I'm really happy about that. But like the Pegasus itself is not a marquee race on the calendar.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. It's not the same as it used to be. It's not the same as what it was intended to be when Frank started it out as a kind of an entrepreneurial experiment, where you had to buy the $1 million entry, and then you could use that ticket on either one of your horses if they were approved, or on somebody else who was invited, and you can kind of set up a lease share, revenue share, but it was very like cool and entrepreneurial and really cutting edge. But like most things, Joe, that was like 15, 20 years ago, right? I mean, am I talking out of my ass? It was a long time ago. And I know, and we'll
like
get
10 years, like 10 years ago.
And we'll get to this, maybe now we talk about Belinda's NBC interview on Pegasus Day, where she was actually talking about, the future of racing. And give me a second, because I'll circle back to Frank when, for a moment. And Belinda was quoted as saying, she was asked about the future of racing at Gulfstream. And she said, "We want to look to the future. It's whatever's in the best interest of racing." Then her next quote was, "It's not a great thing for horses to have a racetrack in dense urban settings." Then she continued. The next question from Brittany was, to what do you think racing at Gulfstream is going to be in 5 years? And Belinda said, "Well, we're going to have continued discussions with horsemen and ask them, where do you want to be in 5 years? We want to have a healthy discussion and a great opportunity to work together." Now, here's the other kicker in a series of kickers. "My family," this is from Belinda, "my family has a long history in racing, and we care about the business." Let's stop and put a pin in that for a second. Okay, now I'm going to circle back to Frank. So Frank, and certainly Andy, his son, had a great interest in racing. Frank, according to Equibase statistics, Stronach Stables has over 9,000 starts, 1,800 wins, and almost $100 million in purses. And they were the Eclipse leading owner in 2008, Joe. See if you can follow this pattern. In 2019, when he got booted out, they had over 200 starts. 2020, Stronach Stable had 170 starts. 2021, 120 starts. I'm rounding a little bit. 2022, 100 starts. 2023, they had 58 starts. And last year, 2024, Stronach Stable had less than 50 starts. They were at a high of $11 million in purse earnings, and now last year was $400,000 in purse earnings. So when Belinda says, "My family has a long history in racing and we care about the business," I call bullshit, because she doesn't have a long history in racing. Her father has a long history in racing. Her father, has a lot of moral issues that allegedly that are going on, right now in the court system. But as far as his interest in thoroughbred racing, he did a lot to add to dollars, intrigue, experimenting, as far as like trying to make the industry better. And he has a long-standing history in racing and cares about the business. But so far, all Belinda's been doing, other than these one-off huge days of, Pegasus Day, look at me, I'm the belle of the ball. Other than that, she's had a history of closing racetracks more so than helping racetracks. Anyway,
I was watching that interview with Brittany Urton, and shout out to Brittany, because she asked her tough questions in like a very short interview, and it could have been fluff. There are a lot of people who would have just asked fluffy questions and let Belinda talk about all the celebrities that were there. But she asked what the horsemen wanted to know, which is, what is the future of racing, and especially at Gulfstream and at Santa Anita. And Melinda did not have great answers. No. Like, let's be real. Yeah. Like noted equine scientist Belinda Stronach suddenly says the reason they want to move the racing is because it's not good for horses to be in dense urban areas. Well, I don't know. Like, why don't we ask the people who run Churchill Downs in Louisville, or Fairgrounds in New Orleans, or people at Aqueduct or Belmont, or in Hong Kong,
or Japan. Right, exactly.
Any of these places where they run races and stable horses in cities, whether or not that's bullshit, because that just sounded like a new talking point. And it kind of, in a weird way, it kind of made me appreciate Keith Brackpool's offensive more, because at least he was being honest.
Yeah, at least he's being
At
straightforward.
least he was saying straight up, listen, this land is too valuable to continue losing money running a racetrack, so we need an alternative. And that's harsh, obviously. And I don't, I think there should be a more conciliatory tone in terms of working with the horsemen, but at least it's like an honest viewpoint, and like you can at least respect it and work with that to a certain extent. Like, don't tell me it's because you want to stop racing at Gulfstream because it's too loud for the horses.
Right.
Like,
right. Because
that to me sounded like total nonsense. And yeah, like you said, she's got a history of closing racetracks. Like, look, we didn't talk about it that much, but like, look at what happened. Look at what's happening with Pimlico and Laurel. Mm-hmm. Like, the second that they were able to get Pimlico off of their books, they said, "Oh yeah, we'll close Laurel too." Well, as a trade-off, we'll get rid of Laurel, and you guys can make Pimlico like the year-round racing hub for Maryland. Mm-hmm. They could not wait to throw Laurel under the bus, in addition to getting Pimlico off of their balance sheet. Like, there's absolutely no, I guess, no truth and no credibility behind the idea that they want to stop racing at Gulfstream for the betterment of the horses or the train or the horsemen. Like, it just completely defies logic. It's completely implausible. And I just hope that people keep the pressure on, not just on them, but on some other people in the business to step up and start saving some of these racetracks. Because at the end of the day, like, it's true. Like, if you do not have a natural connection to racing like Frank Stronach had, as a business person, it makes no sense to run most of these racetracks. It doesn't. And so in that way, I honestly don't blame them, but that makes it incumbent upon the billionaires and the really wealthy people in this business to step up, put like some working capital together and start saving some of these racetracks, because the people in charge at the Stronach Group do not seem to have any interest in keeping them going.
Keep them going, nor any interest in actually working with the horsemen. And I can tell that from my own past history and recent history with my time on the board. Joe, the other thing I thought was could have been telling is and again, maybe Belinda wasn't ready for this question. I don't think she was, but if she had just said, "Hey, this real estate is worth too much," or if she had said, "Our overhead is killing us," something along those lines. I mean, obviously softened, but basically, it's been shown in recent history in racing that you don't need to have the huge grandstands. You don't need to have capacity for 50, 60, 70,000 people. You don't need to have all the ancillary, attachments that these big racetracks who have folded needed to have anymore. In the glory days of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, 1900, 1930, 1940, 1950s, people would pack the stands every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to watch racing. That's not the case anymore. The majority of people are watching racing on their computers or on their phones, so you don't need to have capacity like you used to. I.e., look at Kentucky Downs. They have like seating for 1,000 people. Colonial Downs, much smaller racetrack. For the most part. So to have the expansive grandstands and all of the shopping and restaurants and everything that Gulfstream has, it's a tremendous amount of overhead. I get it. You don't need to have that. Now, if she had said, this is going to be a commercial site, which will be better used and appreciated in an urban area, and we're going to find another spot for these horses to go where it's less populated or it's more suited for them, then I could see that. If she had gone into, we want to have, we have a new vision, we want to go into a racetrack so horses can have, round pens to roll in, or they can have areas, to graze like they do in Europe or like they do in other racetracks, and the horses flourish by being outside more instead of caged in their stalls, then I would understand a little bit more. But it was not her best day. It was not her best look. And I think you used the term disingenuous. And I think that is exactly the vocabulary word of the day with regard to how I would describe her answers on the NBC interview.
And the thing is too, like, even if there's some kind of deal struck where, they keep racing for the next, let's say 5-6 years, and then they revisit the agreement, like, it just doesn't seem sustainable to have people like this in charge of the game, which leads me to wonder and ponder about alternatives in South Florida, because there's a ton of horsemen and a lot of horses, and there's a rich tradition of racing in South Florida. To me, the two most obvious alternatives would be Palm Meadows, which unfortunately, if I'm correct, is also owned by the Stronach Group, right?
It is, and I think when they I haven't seen actually evidence of this, but I've heard that when they got that training facility approved, the mayor of Palm Meadows made them, I think legally, formally sign off saying that they would not have live racing there because of the noise ordinances and things like that. So, that Palm Meadows is not going to be a landing spot for a racetrack. But go ahead. You said there were a couple of them.
No, yeah. Well, then the other obvious one would be Hialeah,
right,
which is still there. You know, it's not in the shape that it used to be. They run like a month or two of quarter horse racing in the winter, like that's it. But it's still there. It hasn't been knocked down. It's still owned by the Brunetti family,
right,
who do have an interest in racing. At least the old man did. I don't know about the kids as much. And Hialeah obviously was a South Florida staple for a really long time. But it's just, you know, I worry that, you know, if we do get to continue racing at Gulfstream for like the next 4 or 5 years, are we just kicking the can down the road to have this existential crisis in another 4 or 5 years from now? Do we need, as an industry, and especially in Florida, to start seriously considering alternatives so we can tell the Stronach Group to kick rocks?
Yeah, and I think, Joe, that there were two other options, you know, because Hialeah, I think the father was very interested, and the one son who also recently passed was also very interested. And I think the one remaining son who is in charge of their holdings is not a fan of racing. So I don't know what the story is on that front. But you also have Tampa, which has live racing right now and has excess capacity as far as additional acreage to be able to build, you know, more barns and things like that. And you also have Ocala, you know, which is horse central south, at least, even if you don't want to believe their advertising that they really are the center of horse country in the world. But, you know, you have all those training facilities. You have OBS that has a 1 mile track as well, and has, you know, gaming contracts and parimutuel licenses. So there are other options out there. I think if nothing else, if we take away from this whole situation that it was a wake up call and therefore we need to act on it, that's the important takeaway from all this. Gulfstream is not our future, at least not in first, you know, ownership, and they're not doing anything but selling it to developers if they sell it. So, you know, let's wake up as an industry and find other options, and see if we can, you know, continue to sustain racing in Florida, because it's too important. It's too important to our industry. It's too important to the state. And we can't have California and Florida fall off the face of the earth when it comes to this industry.